3 pillars. So firstly, we have the mentorship, where each project is paired up with 2 high-level experts, the capacity building workshops every month, and a support from the Paris Peace Forum Secretariat.
The types of projects are very diverse, and they come from all over the world.
The first day that the war in Ukraine started, we put all our regular activity on hold and we started building the digital infrastructure that was needed by the refugees coming into Romania.
Josia est un programme pour sauvegarder le patrimoine en situation d'urgence. Faire partie du Scale-up programme nous a permis de réaliser à quel point nous agissons pour la paix.
Empatia is a project that promotes the use of AI to solve public issues such as health, development, or climate change.
The purpose of the initiative is to create collaboration on environmental issues across the India-Pakistan border on issues like air pollution, water usage, and sustainable agriculture.
The Scale-up program is an accelerator of global governance.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could ask you all to be seated for the beginning of the next session titled Cohesion in a Fractured World, Interfaith Innovation Amid a Multicrisis. If I could ask for the panelists to come to the stage, Dr. Chris Seipel, His Excellency Abdullah Shehi, and also Meredith McGee. Welcome. Wonderful. I hope everyone has got their headphones for this session. This is a new concept, most certainly for me and some of the panelists, but we're looking forward to it. Always good to embrace technology. Good morning, everyone. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here with you today at the Paris Peace Forum, where we're not only gathering to discuss the challenges of our time, but also exploring creative and powerful ways to tackle them together. By way of introduction, my name is Zishan Zafar. I am a commissioner at the AI, Faith and Civil Society Commission, and also the executive director for the Abu Dhabi Forum for Peace, which looks to establish a narrative of peace and cohesion across the world. Let's begin with a powerful fact. Over 84% of the global population identifies with a faith or belief system. That's more than 6 billion people who draw purpose, community, and strength from their faith. Now that's an immense force for good, if used correctly, especially to foster unity and understanding. But unfortunately, the reality is that we live in a world that's also increasingly marked and defined by division, political polarization, religious tension, and technological disruption. In our session today, titled Cohesion in a Fractured World, Interfaith Innovation and Amid a Multicrisis, we're going to have a look at how institutions are evolving through innovation to address today's challenges. And our panelists here today are going to be sharing some of their pioneering approaches that bridge those divides, sustain dialogue, and also promote peace and justice across diverse faiths. We'll be hearing from initiatives from the UAE to global movements for religious freedom and pluralism. In a moment, I'm going to be welcoming the panelists further. However, to set the stage, it's my great honor to introduce Her Excellency Noura bint Mohammed Al-Kabi as the Minister of State at the UAE's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Her Excellency has been a visionary in cultural and creative initiatives that enhance mutual understanding. Not only is she breaking glass ceilings in the region and beyond, her influence extends to her role on UNESCO's executive board, as well as her deserved honors as a Chevalier of the French Order of the Legion of Honor, and also the French Order of Merit. Her efforts really truly symbolize the UAE's dedication and commitment to advancing interfaith cultural dialogue on the global stage. And today, we are fortunate that she is bringing her insights on the critical role of interfaith institutions, cultural heritage preservation, and also the UAE's vision for a society where values like compassion, honesty, and respect, which are shared values globally, underpin both local and international diplomacy. Please join me in welcoming Her Excellency Noura bint Mohammed Al Kaabi to the stage.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I begin by thanking the Paris Peace Forum organizers for putting together another successful edition of the important event. Forums like this are becoming increasingly important. They provide critical platforms to dialogue, collaboration, and exchange of ideas among leading thinkers and actors to address shared global challenges. This panel, Cohesion, in a fractured world, interfaith innovation amid multi-crisis, can't come at a better time as we continue to see a breakdown of mutual trust and dialogue and the growing hold of polarization, division, and extremism in this world. We must urgently come together and renew our commitment to tolerance, peaceful coexistence, and human fraternity, as well as to the institutions that promote and uphold such values. These are values that have been shared among societies throughout the ages and hold the power to unlock sustainable development and advance peaceful agendas and collaboration. The spirit of coexistence and tolerance is part of the United Arab Emirates DNA. The country's founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, set the roadmap for the UAE today, founding the country on principles of tolerance, collaboration, and progress, and we continue to follow in his steps today. The UAE is one of the world's diverse places, where more than 200 nationalities live in peace and prosperity and call it their home. It is something we take immense pride in, for it represents who we want to be as a country. It is also a pragmatic choice that enriches our ability to bring innovative solutions for the progress of our people and the world. The UAE's commitment to values of tolerance is evident through multiple initiatives, such as the establishment of the UAE Ministry of Tolerance and Coexistence in 2016. The UAE also established the Zayed Award for Human Fraternity in 2019 to reward exceptional efforts to bridge divides and advance human progress. Our dedication to tolerance is manifested in the development of Abrahamic Family House in Abu Dhabi in 2023, and you're going to hear my brother Abdullah Shahi talk about it further in this panel. The Abrahamic Family House is embodied of the UAE's commitment for peaceful coexistence. The 6,500 square meter complex houses not only a mosque, a church, and a synagogue, but also a place that fosters interfaith collaboration through different programs that promote understanding and aim to build an inclusive community through safe spaces and welcoming environments. We also believe in the role of culture in creating cohesion and collaboration. In 2018, we signed a historic agreement with the UNESCO and the government of Iraq under the Revive of the Spirit of Mosul initiative to support the reconstruction and rehabilitation of the Nouri Mosque and Al-Hadba Manarat, Al-Tahira Church, and Al-Sa'a Church. Restoring these iconic landmarks will contribute to a broader cultural and social revival, empowering local communities to be part of post-conflict rebuilding efforts. In 2023, the UAE also co-penned the unanimously adopted Security Resolution 2868 on tolerance, peace and security, which addressed for the first time the link between hate speech, extremism, related forms of intolerance and conflict. This resolution has paved the way for the international community to work closely to combat all forms of intolerance and use of inter-religious and intercultural dialogue as an essential tool to achieve peace, social stability, and internationally agreed upon development goals. You will recognize from all of these examples that our efforts could have only come to fruition with the support of our partners and with the input from multiple stakeholders and players. And at a time intolerance, division, and polarization continue to be on the rise, the world needs to double down its combined efforts to encourage interreligious and intercultural dialogue and promote our shared values. We must support institutions and initiatives that offer safe spaces for dialogue, exchange, and creation of institutional framework that promotes unity. We must champion innovation by embracing creative and new approaches in the arts, culture, and digital platforms to advance authentic harmony and embrace change rooted in shared values. We must also look forward to do more in such a divided and polarized world. I really look forward to hearing the ideas coming out of this panel, and I look forward to see stronger collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Excellency. And thank you for sharing your inspiring vision on how culture and interfaith institutions really do bridge divide and build that resilience. And your insights on the UAE frameworks for unity, like the Abrahamic Family House, the Ministry of Tolerance, and your work at UNESCO, those partnerships certainly do highlight the power of shared values in fostering peace. And we also would like to appreciate your commitment and the tone that you set for today's discussion. Let's give her another round of applause for her intervention and her keynote speech. With that, I would also like to acknowledge His Excellency, the Minister of the UAE to France, who is in attendance here, and His Eminence Sheikh Mahfouz bin Bayer, the Secretary General of the Abu Dhabi Forum, and the other wonderful distinguished guests who are sitting in within this panel. I am going to turn now to our distinguished panelists, and I'm going to ask that when they speak, that they hold the microphone very closely to their lips. Our speakers have been instrumental in advancing peace and cooperation through the intersection of faith, diplomacy, and institutional collaboration. I want to introduce Dr. Chris Seipel, our first panelist. Chris joins us from the United States as a distinguished voice in religious freedom, religious diplomacy, and peace building. I would also describe him as a polymath. He is a President Emeritus of the Institute for Global Engagement and a Senior Fellow at the University of Haifa's Laboratory for Religious Studies, and also a Senior Fellow at the Jackson School of International Studies at the University of Washington. Joining us from the UAE is His Excellency Abdullah Al-Shehi, a leader in promoting coexistence through spatial and cultural design, and is the acting executive director of the Abrahamic Family House that comprises of 3 separate houses of worship, a synagogue, a church, and a mosque. And if anyone has not been to the UAE, it is an absolute delight to see this construction, the space, and the harmony that really does permeate. And I would add to that, epitomizes the spirit of the UAE. And our third panelist is Meredith Preston McGee. Meredith serves as the Secretary General of the Global Center for Pluralism, and with over 20 years of conflict resolution experience across Africa and Asia, Ms. Preston McGee's work really does reflect her dedication to fostering pluralism and peace worldwide. Welcome to our panelists. So, to begin, let's set the stage. And we have a lot to live off after the opening keynote address from Her Excellency. And I want to ask each of our panelists, and you can take this in any order that you wish, to really share their brief thoughts on the foundational question of why religious and interfaith institutions matter in today's world, particularly in light of the conflict that we're enduring, the multi-crises, and how can we achieve conflict resolution and peace building? Please. Chris, you can take it.
There's too much grace among the panelists, which is a good thing. My name is Chris. I'm grateful to be here with you, and thank you, Your Excellency, for the wonderful introduction. As Zishan mentioned, there's 84% of the world believes in something greater than itself. And if you were to think about this differently, if we're going to solve the global crises that we have, the polycrisis, it's going to take all sectors, and in every sector there's going to be people of faith. So it's not a question of if, but when you will partner with somebody who does not believe or pray like you do. So what are the organizations and institutions for thinking about this? I would begin with terms of reference. Interfaith is a good word, but where I come from, it suggests a watering down of the differences. So sometimes I like to use the phrase multifaith. Multifaith suggests that there are differences, there are irreconcilable theological differences about how we believe in the eternal. But all the more reason to work together because of our common values and how we think about the future that we steward together. I would also caution against what I would call interfaithism. Interfaithism is when people come together and they have pictures and they say things and nothing happens. We have to continue to move from principles to practice in how we do these things, and we have to do it in a positive fashion. That said, as a Christian, I would also stress in terms of peace building that I have become a better Christian when I learn and listen to and read Muslims and Jews, from Muslims and Jews. Jonathan Sachs, the UK rabbi who is now deceased, unfortunately, has taught me an enormous amount. The Muslim scholar Abbas Arua from Switzerland, who's written a book, The Quest for Peace. These things have taught me a great deal about how we work together. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Chris. And over to you, Abdullah.
All right. So I can hear myself when I'm speaking, so I'll use the headphones. But in the period today where conflict is also characterized by the subservience of religion as one of the tools used to foster divide, it's really important, and parroting really what Chris said, is to frame our differences positively. And that's really what we do at the Abrahamic Family House. The three separate houses of worship are, they stand on equal ground and they speak to each other in such a way. But paradoxically, the most important space is the space in the middle where the communities can come together. We've really, what we wanted to do at the AFH is to do something different, where we create this bond between the three communities through shared activities. Now, the best way to bring people together who don't necessarily want to get along with each other is to make sure that their kids are friends, because that will force them to become friends whether they like it or not. And it really started with this experiment at the Abrahamic Family House that we did. This was back in April of 2023, where we had the three communities by themselves bring their kids to engage in arts workshops. And so the Christian kids were painting Easter eggs at the church, the Muslims were decorating lanterns or fawanis at the mosque, and the Jewish kids were decorating pillows at the synagogue. And the kids heard about each other's workshops, so they went together and started playing with each other. And we were like, you know what, that's interesting. Let's bring them together and let them create something. So we started these monthly workshops for about 50 kids, 60 kids, 20 Muslim kids, 20 Christian kids, and 20 Jewish kids. And we said, come and do something together, create paper mache or flower arrangement or something. These became so popular, they brought their families with them, they brought their friends with them, and now we do it once a week. We have 100 kids show up at the Abrahamic Family House, with about 300 others waiting, because we're also a bit of a small place. And we saw that these kids became friends, their families became friends, they started coming together, and their differences now cannot be used to separate them, which I think is a really important element.
Wonderful.
And if you give me a moment, Zishan, I'll put on my headphones so I can hear you.
Oh. Incredibly inspiring. Where else do you see that in the world today? Meredith.
I've turned the volume down on my headphones. I'll see if that actually works. Thank you so much. And to Her Excellency, thank you for such inspiring remarks. I think this moment that we're in is grim and difficult. And I think that despite the aspirations, I think we also need to recognize the challenge. And one of the things that we see in all of the places we work at the Global Center for Pluralism, and what I've seen across the African continent also, is a crisis of trust in institutions. institutions, a crisis of trust in national projects, in the social contract between the state and citizens, and between citizens themselves. And I think in those moments, what we do see is there does remain trust in faith institutions, and that needs to be utilized for the greater good to bridge divides. I suppose what I worry about is that we are also seeing this being used for division. And so I think it's a reminder as well that we need to really double down on these actions to be deliberate as faith institutions in individual societies, but also globally, to demonstrate that you can find shared values in each of these faiths, that there is a bedrock of values that will mirror itself from faith to faith. And too often we're focusing through our social media silos, through so much of the media telling us that we are divided and we are divided. And what we really see with pluralism, I think you were mentioning about seeing your differences as a source of strength, as a source of engagement for more successful societies. And interfaith institutions, interfaith leadership is really critical, both within societies that are developing, but I've seen this particularly in spaces of conflict, where this trust has been so deeply eroded that often leaders of faith are some of the only national leaders that will be listened to and will be trusted. And so I think in this time, more than ever, we need to be putting our support behind those sorts of leaders and not see this also as the job only of faith institutions, but a job of society more largely. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Meredith. Really bringing home the reality of trust and the importance of faith actors as being part of the solution. And Abdullah, thank you for sharing some of those insights about turning differences into positive frameworks for the work that you're doing, and Chris, turning faith into action. So I will say that the warm-up act is now over, and let's get through to some of the more serious questions. Dr. Seipel, you have been working, for the last 25, 30 years. Your resume is incredible when you see the amount of work that you've done. It really put me to shame when I first saw it, and it made me think, what have I been doing all my life? But could you explain your concept of covenantal pluralism and how it applies globally? And also, how might it address today's global challenges?
Well, thank you very much for your kind words. I should say that the concept of covenantal pluralism is not mine alone. It was developed with two colleagues of mine, Dennis Hoover and Chris Stewart, and we were all working at the Templeton Religion Trust, which is a $2 billion global philanthropy, and I've been advising them for the past 8 years. And so we did what we considered double listening. What are the needs of the world, and of course, what are the needs of the donor or donor intent? What was the intent? And Sir John Templeton cared very deeply about listening to the world. So we came up with this idea of covenantal pluralism, and we were very clear to define two key words. One is diversity. Diversity is not a goal. Diversity is a demographic fact. It is the presence of difference. Pluralism, in our construct, is the engagement of difference. Pluralism can be negative or positive. Covenantal pluralism is a positive and mutually respectful engagement of difference. It is the pledge or the obligation, the responsibility to not only engage, but respect and to protect your neighbor. That's what covenantal pluralism is. And we came up with 3 enabling conditions: character development, freedom of religion or belief, and then the engagement process itself. And we call the engagement process cross-cultural religious literacy, and that embodies or embeds the ideas of character development and freedom of conscience or religion and belief. And that's how we've created a funding initiative that's given away $60+ million over the last 5 years. And to answer your last part of your question, we have funded programs in Central Asia, Indonesia, Ghana, and other places. And as one working example, in the case of Indonesia, we funded an institute that now has 32 partners in Indonesia and has trained 11,000 madrasa leaders, but also Christian, Buddhist, and Hindu teachers K through 12 in cross-cultural religious literacy. Why do they want this certificate? It's not because of human rights or reconciliation or peace building. It's because, as I referenced in my previous answer, It's in somebody's self-interest to be equipped to engage somebody else that they need to engage to solve the world's global challenges. So we position cross-cultural religious literacy as professional development. It's in your self-interest. And now we're equipping next generation to engage others and use their faith as a source of belief where they can talk about deep difference to get to common values and solve challenges as common neighbors.
That's an incredible example of how endowments can be used with faith actors in conjunction with multi-stakeholders out there. And that's an area I'd love to explore in the future with you, Chris, if not today. Let's move on to the interfaith spaces and their tangible impacts in times of crisis. Abdullah, the UAE has become home to a lot of innovative projects around faith. You know, we have seen some fantastic documents coming out of there, like the Marrakesh Declaration, the Human Fraternity document, the visit of the Pope, the launch of the AI Faith and Civil Society Commission this year, and also the launch of, most importantly, the Abrahamic Family House, which you've already described to us. And I want you to bring that alive. What does the Abrahamic Family House offer that's fresh, relevant, and able to address today's unique multi-crisis?
So, firstly, I think in today's dark days, or in the dark days that we live in today, it's really important to continue the good work. And I was watching this TV show the other day, and there was something that said that really resonated with me, which is only in the darkest hours does the light truly shine. And at the AFH, in this time of crisis, it was really important for us to embody two elements. First, consistency, and the second, flexibility. And it may seem oxymoronic when I talk about it, but really, it's be consistently flexible. And so, despite all the disruptions, despite everything, we've continued on our mission. And I think that's important. People need to have that reassurance of having that safe space to be able to come in, to be able to engage, to be able to work together. And the second element in terms of innovation and bringing people together, we've really worked on our programmings, and we have tangible, what I like to call tangible programs of impact. These are in three broad categories that I'll talk about. First is inclusive programming. And inclusivity over here is not just on a faith level, but also on an ability level. So one of the most heartwarming programs that we've engaged in is actually working with people with diverse issues. So for example, we taught the communities how to read Braille and how to speak in sign language. And we brought in people of determination who utilize these mediums to actually teach the communities together. So having the communities work together in an atmosphere of service was really, really important. And the second thing, and I talked about families and parents coming in. So really we focused our programming on parenting, on creativity. We started this book club and also a children's reading club where we have a storytelling, we bring a storyteller, and the communities come together, they select their own books, and they engage with each other on creating these bonds on common human challenges that transcend faith boundaries. You know, we all have kids and we may have kids in the future, and the same challenges exist no matter where you go. My kid doesn't want to go to school, my kid hates math, etc. So how do you work together on bridging everyday scenarios? The third thing, and I talked about it in my previous answer, previous intervention, was these cross-community initiatives that have continued stronger than ever before. Really, the third thing as well is continuing to engage with local communities. Today, as we were talking about, the Abrahamic Family House is a space that is created to bring faith communities of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism together. But within these communities, there is a massive amount of diversity, which is part of the beauty of these communities as well. And so, for example, we bring in all the Christian denominations. The church is a Catholic church, but we have a monthly ecumenical prayer that brings all the different denominations of Christianity that exist in the UAE together. The shul, or the synagogue, is an Orthodox synagogue, but we bring everybody to pray over there as well. We also engage with the broader community communities in the UAE. So we bring in the Hindus, we bring in the Buddhists, the Church of Latter-day Saints, etc., who come in, and even those who don't believe. One of the things that we say at the entrance is it doesn't matter whether you believe in a faith or not. The 15 or 16% of the global community who doesn't believe in any faith is just as welcome as everybody else. And really, these opportunities for collaboration is what directly addresses the tensions and challenges that we live today. Sorry, I took a little bit more time, but...
No, absolutely fine. It's wonderful to see what's happening in the midst of a conflict that's really sensitive in the region. Just to see the vibrancy and the passion and the trust and the friendships that are forming at the Abrahamic Family House is certainly most needed and needs to be replicated across the world. Meredith, I want to explore pluralism from your perspective. And you've worked in diverse and very complex regions worldwide. Your work in Africa and the global south especially has given you some real valuable insights into conflict resolution as well as promoting pluralism. How have these experiences influenced your approach at the Global Center for Pluralism? And also, what are the global lessons that can be drawn to foster inclusive societies, especially in regions facing, similar challenges?
Thanks so much for the question. And just to start by saying there's an enormous amount of innovation, particularly in the African continent, that we really can and must learn from. I also have to say I love being on panels with other pluralists because Chris has done part of the defining for me already, which is great. As we always say, diversity is a fact. All of our societies are diverse. What we look at when we look at pluralism at the Global Center is that pluralism is the positive choice. It is the conscious choice that you're making to embrace that diversity as a strength within society. However, because we're not looking only at pluralism from a faith perspective, the other thing that we look at is what does that diversity mean? That can be ethnic, it can be linguistic, it can be religious, it can be gender, it can be geography, it can be political, it can be so many different things. And importantly also, we are all of these things. And I think what's particularly important when we think also about the power of interfaith leadership and institutions, particularly in conflict spaces, is that what we're thinking about is not only I am a Christian, I am a Muslim, I am a Jew, but also I am of a particular ethnicity, I am of a particular political persuasion, I might be of a particular region or area, linguistically and so forth. And so it enables us to find different points of connection across our identities. And what I've seen across the African conflicts that I've been involved in trying to resolve is that really at the heart of every single one of these conflicts is two questions. And one is, how do we engage with this diversity? Are we pushing people to the margins of our societies, or are we drawing them in? And for that, it isn't just this question of how do we approach our diversity, how do we engage in pluralist action, how do we make the conscious choices, but it is a question of belonging. And what does it fundamentally mean to belong? And I know this is also a fundamental question within faith communities. What does it mean for each of us to belong in our society? I think all of us have had a moment where we felt that we belonged or not. And moments, I think if we reflected personally, where we have othered someone else. And so when I hear about initiatives such as yours at the Abrahamic Family House, what you're doing is drawing people in. And what I've seen in conflicts and attempts to resolve across Africa is very much at the core of that question of belonging, of the push and pull of these spaces. Within that, we do see the power of cross-faith collaborations. And I would look at examples such as the Middle Belt of Nigeria, where we've seen communities who are predominantly Muslim and Christian, but not only. They are also of different ethnicities. They are also perhaps pastoralists and sedentary communities and so forth. But their faith has been one of the ways that they've been able to find engagement to talk across those divisions.
Thank you, Meredith. That was extremely profound, especially the foundational comment there around an active consciousness of pluralism. And that really resonates with me, even being from a different faith, because my holy book speaks to my conscience. And I think that is something that should really speak to every individual if we are serious and sincere in our endeavors for peacemaking. Building on the need for a global perspective, I'm going to return back to Chris. And I want to explore religious freedom, especially with its role in human rights. So religious freedom and human rights are closely linked. They shape societies globally. And from the work that you've been doing, especially within the International Religious Freedom Secretariat, how do you see this intersection, and what are those insights that you can share with us here today about promoting international religious freedom?
Thank you, Zeshan. First, I want to identify with what Meredith is saying and the idea of belonging. That's so critical, which is a positive thing. I do want to also add, at least in reference to what I said in my last answer regarding the certificate programs on cross-cultural religious literacy, they are also builders of social cohesion and deterring extremism. So it's not just the professional development of the individual, the governments can get behind it because it's building social cohesion, because it provides competencies and skills for how to engage one another with this adaptable framework. Regarding religious freedom and human rights, there are two camps, two thoughts on this. One is that religious freedom is the first freedom and other freedoms flow from it. Human rights, the religious freedom is just one of many. I'm in the first camp. And I'm there for what I think is a very logical reason, that without freedom of conscience, you can't make choices about the other freedoms. So that's how I think about that, and that's how I think about the founding of my own country, the United States of America, although there are different opinions. There are also two camps for advancing religious freedom and human rights. One camp is the advocates. And neither of them are right against the other. They both are needed. But advocacy is about, at least in the American context, it's about outside in. It's about name, blame, and shame. And it can be a positive thing for sure, but you end up alienating the people you need to work with because you're constantly putting them down from the outside in. The builders camp is the inside-out approach, and they walk with in the local context. And they work with the local people. Now, of course, you can get too close to the local government and be accused of faith washing. But it's a balance. And the point is, to my earlier, my first answer, is you have to do something practical. You can't get caught up in interfaithism with the photo op, et cetera, et cetera. So, to the question about the IRF Secretariat, the International Religious Freedom Secretariat, and another place where I'm a senior fellow of the Love Your Neighbor community, they're both grantees of the Templeton Religion Trust. And these two grantees have been working together in Berlin last month and starting tomorrow in Prague with His Most Excellent Excellency, Sheikhna, in the Abu Dhabi Peace Forum, and working together to take on Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, which have to be two sides of the same coin, by the way. We have to have Muslims and Jews working against the hatred together, allowing for the obvious nuances in the approaches that the responses demand. I'll stop with that.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing that perspective, especially the inside-out approach, which certainly resonates with me. Abdullah, I wanted to explore the role of how interfaith spaces help to foster long-term peace. And over the past few years, we've seen the projects like the House of One in Berlin and also efforts in London to honor shared religious heritage. What unique approach does the Abrahamic Family House bring as an interfaith project, especially in a non-Western, predominantly Muslim country? And what does this really suggest about the potential for interfaith engagement in the Muslim world as well?
All right, so I think there are two elements to it. The first, and maybe in my humble opinion, is the historical context. As Her Excellency mentioned in her keynote address, interfaith collaboration and acceptance is part of our DNA. It's engraved in our bones. In the UAE. The Abrahamic Family House has the honor of being across the street from the Zayed National Museum, which will be the National Museum of the UAE. Now, one of the most special exhibits over there, to me at least, is a stone tablet that was found in the mountains of Ras Al Khaimah, where my family is from for the past 1400 years or so, which is a whole different story. But that tablet was found by tribesmen in the 60s or 70s. Back then, people didn't really read and write. We had high level of illiteracy in the UAE, and they saw symbols that they didn't know. So they took the stone to a museum, And at the museum, they found out that it's a tombstone that has Hebrew writing on it, and it dates back from the 16th or 17th century. That tells you a few things. It tells you that there was a Jewish community in the UAE, that they felt welcome and they were stable because they buried their dead over there. The tombstone is quite large. It's about 2 feet by 1 foot, so about 60 centimeters by 30 centimeters. Compared to the typical sizes of a tombstone back then, it seemed quite large. And so it showed that the community was also comfortable over there. You know, move forward a couple of years and you have a very diverse, or a couple of centuries rather, and you have a really diverse community in Abu Dhabi. But placing that within a Muslim framework is also quite important because coexistence and tolerance is not just an Emirati value, it's also an Islamic value. 1400 years ago, Islam was the new kid on the block, and it had to start in a place where engagement was quite important, and we see that historically from Prophet Muhammad's actions as well, where he engaged with Christians and Jews in his framework. Bringing that to a modern construct today and a modern conceptualization is quite important because due to the unfortunate desecration of the faith from about 20-30 years ago till today, Islam was always touted as the intolerant faith, the faith that hates everybody. So it was really important to set the framework whereby Islam is actually a medium or a glue that brings other people together. And we try and embody that within the DNA of the Abrahamic family house through everything that we do. So we make sure, for example, that the programming that brings people together at the mosque is actually open to everybody. And we do the same thing as well with the other houses of worship. You know, we're entering the Christmas and Hanukkah season very soon, and we have beautiful villages set up in the houses of worship where the wider community can come in. We make sure that the wider community can come into the Abrahamic family house and be able to drink a cup of coffee and meet with their friends. At the same time, there is a Ramadan village that takes place, and we have traditional games and non-traditional games available where people come together, but always with the imam there, engaging with people and learning from them and maybe contributing something as well.
Wonderful, thank you so much. It really does show you the power of history and the narratives that can be created. Meredith, I'm going to roll two questions into one because I know you have to go off to another panel. So thank you, first of all, for being here with us. So under your leadership at the Center for Pluralism, you've launched various initiatives and you assess and promote pluralism globally. Could you just tell us a bit more and share some of the insights from the Global Pluralism Monitor? And how does it help us to understand and strengthen pluralism across different contexts? And my second question is that I came across one of your TEDx talks. Sorry for doing a bit of research. But you highlighted in your recent TEDx talk that the power of peacemaking and the importance of pluralism. How do you see pluralism addressing today's global challenges, like political polarization, technological disruption? And what are some of those strategies that you believe can advance pluralism?
Well, thank you, and apologies that I'm going to have to dash the minute I finish speaking, which I don't love to do, but I'm moderating a session next door. The Global Pluralism Monitor stemmed from our desire to really figure out what makes pluralism tick in a society. And I think often when we need to engage with complex movements in society, we need to figure out how to get our arms around that. And so it's an applied research tool where we assess at a national level how a society treats diversity. And we'll look at laws and policies, we'll look at how they're applied, we look at the role of different leaders, faith leaders, private sector, civil society, government, and we look at intergroup relationships, and we look at these questions of belonging. And we pull all of that together in the hopes that the tool enables a different way of understanding and seeing your society, seeing new opportunities for advancement of pluralism, also recognizing where there are deficits, and trying to bring different groups together to see how they can collectively advance in some of those spaces. What I would say to your second question is really connected to tools like the Global Pluralism Monitor, because I think right now we need to be able to see the whole board. And Chris, I love that you brought up the Islamophobia and anti-Semitism being two sides of the same coin. I think one of the risks at the moment is that we look at at a grievance, at an issue in a very, very singular, defined way, and we need to be able to see all of these things collectively. When we think, for example, of freedom of religion in a society, the legal framework of how you demonstrate who is free to practice what matters, but it equally matters how you talk about that in your society. You may have freedom of religion in law, but if it doesn't feel that way, that isn't genuine freedom of faith. So really, pluralism enables us to see all of those different connectors and have different kinds of conversations. So thank you, and apologies for running away.
Thank you so much, Meredith. And you really described there the letter of law and the spirit of the law, which is so important in today's times. We've just got under 2.5 minutes, so unfortunately I'm going to ask Abdullah and Chris, I wish we could spend more time here talking about this in under a minute. Just to sum up, Chris, can you tell us your perspective on religious diplomacy? And Abdullah, in an age of crises, multi-crises, whether it's environmental, political or social, what do you believe are the most critical challenges to address? And what role, actually I want you to home in on this, what role does ingenuity play in enabling initiatives like the AFH? So over to you two gentlemen.
Thank you. I'll take a minute. You take a minute. How about that? Our world is still operating under a simple fact. Religious leaders command more respect than political leaders. No offense to political leaders. And therefore, they have a very unique capacity to convene. That said, are religious leaders prepared to engage government, and are government leaders prepared to engage religion? 25 years into this, I'm not convinced that either group is very good at it or wants to be very good at it. They just want to show up for the interfaithism stuff, which I obviously don't like. So there has to be a time and an opportunity to think about what it looks like for executive seminars for senior religious leaders and for government leaders to look at this together. And then only when they start talking in a more direct fashion can the best of faith defeat the worst of religion. And by that I mean the best of the humility and the mystery and the mercy of God regarding faith defeat a religion that validates power and seeks to kill innocents in the name of God.
Well, parroting off what Chris said, actually there is a third kind of leader, which is the technological leader, so to speak. And I think it's important to engage with civil leaders as well, which I would actually hazard to disagree and say that they may command the most respect out of communities. Today, people like, and forgive me for mentioning potentially controversial figures, but people like Elon Musk have a much bigger following than any political or faith leader. And so making sure that interfaith platforms engage with these dimensions is quite critically important. The work that Zishan you're doing, for example, with AI and faith and injecting ethicality into the way that we set up AI paradigms is incredibly important. Faith engaging with the environment and environmental stewardship is really important. The work the UAE has done in COP28, and that was emulated this year in COP29 as well, with the Faith Pavilion, the first time in history where faith actors engage with in non-traditional ways, actually, with different global crises is actually quite important.
Thank you so much. We're coming to an end. In the words of the historian Arnold Toynbee, who did an analysis of the causal factors as to why civilizations went into decline, he looks at that civilizations thrive not merely through resources or structures, but through creative minorities. This is a really important concept. And those creative minorities are those who lead, vision, and courage in times of crisis. And I think that's been really epitomized by the discussion that we've had here today. But I will say one thing, that faith leaders and those that are in attendance here, whether you are working with governments, civil society, you're an academician, it is critically important that you all work together in partnership because you amplify one another's efforts. We've heard already the aspect of trust that Chris Seipel said that people do have in faith leaders. How do we bottle that up and also be able to take that into a more solution-orientated approach that converts faith in action with multi-stakeholders? So once again, I wanted to thank the Paris Peace Forum for the opportunity, and Justin and his team, Justin who's the Director General here at the Paris Peace Forum, and his wonderful team who've been supporting us to have this discussion here. Every year you seem to be setting the bar higher and higher. And to our esteemed panelists, thank you for your perspectives and your passion. You remind us that bridging divides is not only possible, but it's essential. And so with that, please join me in a round of applause for Her Excellency Noor Al-Kabi, Dr. Chris Seipel, Abdullah Shehi, and the absent Meredith McGee. Thank you so much.